So there are a couple of things that might be going on here. So on the one hand, it could be that just at a very basic level, Musk has quickly observed a 40% decline in sales in Tesla in Europe.
He lost everything. In a matter of weeks, Elon Musk, the man hailed as the architect of the future, was on the brink of collapse. $135 billion evaporated. Factories came to a standstill. Workers took to the streets with signs saying, "We built it, you ruined it." But this is not just the story of one billionaire's downfall. This is not just a stock crash. This is the beginning of the end of the American techno empire.
We begin with the president's trade war escalating tonight. This evening, the retaliation against the United States, Canada, and the European Union responding quickly, just hours after President Trump's 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum coming into the United States.
For the first time in Tesla's history, the world's major powers have begun to act in sync. No discussion, no warning. Canada froze tens of millions of dollars in tax breaks, the EU imposed emergency tariffs, and the world's biggest players began snatching up contracts that Musk considered untouchable. Factories in Germany, assembly lines in France, export channels in Asia. Everything is closing for Tesla like doors in a bunker before a strike. This isn't business, it's war. Economic, informational, political.
Canada, the largest supplier of steel to the U.S., slapping new tariffs on $20 billion worth of U.S. goods that are sold in Canada. And the 27 countries of the European Union imposing retaliatory tariffs on up to $28 billion worth of U.S. goods sold in Europe, including Harley-Davidson motorcycles and Kentucky bourbon. President Trump with the Irish Prime Minister visiting the White House today. The president suggesting his tariffs won't stop here, saying, "Of course, I'm going to respond." And tonight, right here, the new poll showing 56% of Americans disapprove of President Trump's handling of the economy. The number's even worse now on the president's tariffs.
Meanwhile, Volkswagen and China's BYD, companies that Musk once publicly derided, are quietly taking over everything he was losing. The secret? Their decisions don't depend on tweets, on egos, on political outbursts. While Musk was accusing everyone and everything of conspiracy, BYD was already opening a new factory in Latin America and signing a 10-year nickel contract in Africa. In 6 months, they surpassed Tesla in global sales. But worse than that, they shattered a major myth, that Tesla is the only path to an electric car future.
Hey Diane, this investigation really just beginning, and one of the key elements will of course be the surveillance video, and investigators potentially have a lot of it to work with as they try to figure out what caused this fire. We know that surveillance footage has been turned over, including video from each of the cars, which could prove vital to understanding what happened here, because each vehicle has its own camera system that works even when the car is off, and 16 cars burned in this fire, and right now investigators don't know what caused it.
And what does Musk do? He goes on air, laughs in the face of investors, calls European officials parasites, rebukes his employees, and loses the trust of those who once thought he was a visionary. His social media has become a field of chaos. His name, from a symbol of progress, has become a toxic brand. And now, attention, the blow comes from the most unexpected side. Canada, one of the first countries to believe in Tesla, is banning exports of key minerals. Nickel, lithium, cobalt, it all goes to competitors. Tesla effectively loses the ability to manufacture batteries in North America. Deliveries are being disrupted, customers are canceling orders en masse, and dealers are closing showrooms. And this is not the bottom.
But they are not ruling out the possibility that this was arson. At the same time, as you just mentioned, there are groups that have been organizing ongoing and peaceful protests at Tesla dealerships around the world. These demonstrations targeting Elon Musk and his affiliation with the Trump administration. Italy's prime minister is said to be close friends with Musk, and there were reports that Teslas have been vandalized in her hometown in Italy. Diane.
This collapse has affected more than just the company. It's blown a hole in the American economy. Pension funds, mortgage programs, even domestic political alliances are all snapping at the seams. Because Tesla wasn't just a company, it was a symbol, and no one else needs that symbol. Why has Europe turned its back on Musk? Who really played out this scenario? Why are Tesla workers now marching against their own creator? And most importantly, what happens next?
And police in Italy are investigating possible arson after a fire destroyed more than a dozen Tesla vehicles. Elon Musk is calling the incident at a Rome dealership terrorism. This comes as Tesla has been the target of recent protests around the world.
It didn't start with an accident on the assembly line or a failure of new products or technical glitches. It started with a feeling, one that cannot be measured, but that investors, journalists, and even ordinary customers can feel. Tesla no longer seems invulnerable. In March 2025, for the first time in a long time, Wall Street analysts began to temper their forecasts for the company's stock, pointing to supply instability and its CEO's harsh rhetoric. But in fact, anxiety has been in the air since as early as January. Earlier this year, the U.S. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration quietly initiated an unscheduled inspection at the Fremont plant after a string of complaints about declining assembly quality. Then came the first signs of internal instability, closed board meetings without minutes, the resignation of the CFO, and rumors of a major staff drain at Starlink. All of this could still be explained by seasonal fluctuations and the usual management turnover. But when 3 major municipalities in Canada canceled their contracts with Tesla in one day, the arguments ended.
Running around on stage with the Tesla stock price, where the stock price had gone in half. And he was overjoyed. What an evil thing to do. What a creep. What a jerk. Like, who derives joy?
Canada became the first domino to fall loudly and painfully. On April 3rd, the government officially announced that Tesla would no longer receive federal subsidies for electric car sales. The wording was dry, reporting irregularities and failure to meet transparency requirements for applications. But that's not what was being discussed on the sidelines in Ottawa. Industry ministry sources said Tesla had become a symbol of political dependence and economic blackmail, unacceptable in an increasingly competitive trade environment. Instantly, all already approved subsidy applications were frozen. The sum of $43 million Canadian dollars disappeared from the horizon of dealers and customers. In 3 days, more than 12,000 Model 3 and Model Ys are cancelled. Banks suspend auto financing for Tesla deals, and the country's largest leasing operator announces that it is temporarily eliminating Tesla from its lineup.
Tesla is a peaceful company. We've never done anything harmful. I've never done anything harmful. I've only done productive things. So I think we just have a deranged, there's some kind of mental illness thing going on here, because this doesn't make any sense.
The response has been overwhelming. Across the country, Tesla car dealerships began to turn into ghosts, shelves of promotional materials emptied, display cases faded, and managers either quit or didn't show up for their shifts. Street actions began in Quebec and British Columbia. Former customers tore Tesla logos off their cars, and one of the showrooms in Edmonton was vandalized. Unknown people painted the facade with the words "foreign parasite" and smashed windows. Canadian TV stations ran daily stories with economists claiming that Tesla was the American curse from which the country was finally beginning to free itself. And just when it looked like it couldn't get any worse, Europe opened a second front. The EU, long irritated by US tariffs on steel, solar panels, and aluminum, finally found a convenient excuse to retaliate. A week after Canada's decision, an extraordinary economic council is meeting in Brussels to adopt a new package of measures within 24 hours. They include not only raising import duties on American electric cars to 20%, but also the complete exclusion of Tesla from European subsidy programs. Germany, France, and Italy, the continent's 3 largest EV markets, are officially removing Tesla from the lists of models subject to subsidies. Italy's industry minister bluntly calls the company a tool of US political pressure. On the sidelines of the European Parliament, they argue that these are not just sanctions but a show of force. If Musk wants to play politics, he will get political consequences.
Well, you will hear people over in Europe say the new Model Y, the Juniper, could be a difference maker. But that's been in that market now for more than a month. And you would think that you'd see a greater snapback if it's going to be a difference maker. Look, we could be wrong. It could be a difference maker once you get the sales for April, May, and June. But when you have a country like Norway, I think the sales were down something like 11% there. I mean, that's a very savvy EV consumer in Norway. And that's long been a strength for Tesla. Very small market, not huge volume, but I think almost all of the vehicles they sell there are electric. And they embraced Tesla long before others. And, you know, the reports there are not encouraging.
Tesla sales are collapsing. Within a month, exports from the US to Europe are down 38%. Major distributors such as Euronova Mobility and Green Roads GmbH suspend partner programs. In Munich, construction of a new service center is disrupted. In Nice, a mass action No More Tesla is organized, an initiative of owners demanding replacement of their cars due to the unavailability of spare parts and increasing service times. A meme spreads on French forums, Tesla is now too expensive, so leave America. Meanwhile, inside the company itself, panic is setting in. According to internal reports leaked to Bloomberg, a group of top executives is proposing an urgent review of its international expansion strategy and suspending investment in plants outside the US. But Musk, sources say, refuses to even listen to the proposals, claiming they are temporary hysteria driven by fear of American leadership. His response, they don't want to buy Tesla. Well, let them ride around in their dead diesels. This phrase, which went viral on social media, would later be recognized as one of Musk's most costly mistakes. It was after her that the three largest European pension funds begin to get rid of Tesla shares. But all of this is just the outward signs of a deeper problem. Europe and Canada haven't just abandoned Tesla as a brand, they've abandoned Musk as a symbol. He is no longer seen as an innovator, as a visionary. He is seen as a threat, politicized, unpredictable, and toxic. In response to the measures, Musk is launching a Twitter attack, accusing Europe of economic Nazism and calling Canada a vassal of Chinese capital. These statements only add fuel to the fire. The German Chancellor issues an official statement in which he explicitly condemns attempts by American corporations to destabilize the EU economy through propaganda and information attacks. Brussels is discussing the possibility of banning the operation of Tesla's autopilot in the EU for reasons of public safety. Inside the company's Palo Alto headquarters, the atmosphere is tense. One of the engineers, who wished to remain anonymous, described the situation as follows: "We feel like we are on the Titanic. The water is already down, but the conductor is still playing." Musk continues to hold meetings, appear on podcasts, and give out interviews, but his every appearance is now accompanied by sarcastic headlines like "Genius in Isolation," "The Innovator Nobody Listens to," and "Patent for Chaos." And while the US is just beginning to realize the scale of the disaster, a new order is already being built outside the country. One in which Tesla is no longer the hero, and Musk is no longer the leader.
A 371, most were saying 350 to 360. Now they're coming in at 336,068. Production of 362, 615. So for some point of reference here, you're going back to Q2, maybe Q1 of 2022 in terms of the last time that they had production this or deliveries this low for one quarter. So again, Tesla deliveries worse than expected at just over 336,000 deliveries in the first quarter. Guys, I'll send it back to you.
That's horrible. Can I just ask Phil, how about the Cybertruck? How's that doing? You got a little inventory there in the Cybertruck?
While Elon Musk has struggled to deal with the foreign policy blowback that has hit Tesla from Canada and Europe, his main competitors have been moving in the shadows. No loud statements, no scandals, no fuss. It was in these weeks that the most ruthless and rapid change of leaders in the electric car market that the global industry has ever seen began. While Tesla was losing markets, Volkswagen and BYD were absorbing them quickly, calculatedly, dispassionately. Volkswagen had been preparing for this moment for more than a year. Their modular MEB platform, which allowed them to produce hatchbacks, sedans and SUVs on the same chassis, was already used in more than 20 models. In Europe, this architecture became the new standard, and thanks to localized supply chains, the Germans were able to dramatically reduce production costs. They didn't just start dumping. They built an entire economic model that made Tesla look like an inefficient and politicized relic of the past. Immediately after the release of the European anti-subsidy rulings, Volkswagen launches a massive marketing campaign under the slogan, "European Choice, European Future." Commercials with clean factories in Dresden, smiling workers in Wolfsburg, and slogans in all EU languages flooded TV screens. Their goal was not just to sell cars. Their goal was to rewrite the narrative, and they did just that.
Worse than expected, 336 368 vehicles, 336,068 vehicles delivered in the first quarter for Tesla. For a point of reference, the street was expecting, the street account was expecting, based on analyst expectations.
Within a month, Tesla's market share in Europe had shrunk by nearly 50%, losing ground to Volkswagen, Renault, and Stellantis. But the Germans struck a key blow not in the premium electric car segment, where Tesla has always felt confident, but in the middle class. Volkswagen's new line of models ID.2 and ID.Aero, launched in March, offered everything that was in the Model 3, but cheaper by €9,000, with extended warranties and government subsidies. For the consumer, the choice became clear. Tesla, deprived of subsidies, lost even a symbolic advantage. Germany's largest car rental operator, Hansafleet, had a contract for 30,000 new electric cars, and none of them were Tesla. But far more dangerous was what was happening far beyond Europe. While headlines were rattling in the West, a real revolution was beginning in Asia and Latin America, and its name was BYD. The Chinese giant, which had long played the role of a quiet challenger, began to act with surgical precision. Unlike Tesla, BYD did not depend on complex international supply chains. It made its own batteries, designed its own chips, and even owned lithium mines. That's what gave it a tremendous advantage when global supply began to collapse. Where Tesla had to suspend production due to delays, BYD ramped up capacity. The company began its expansion with Indonesia and the Philippines, where it signed contracts with government agencies to replace fleet vehicles in 3 weeks. BYD electric buses began displacing Tesla in African capitals, and in Argentina, a major railroad operator ordered 200 electric locomotives from the Chinese complete with BYD systems. But perhaps the most telling episode took place in Brazil, where the local government offered BYD a 12-year tax vacation in exchange for building a battery factory in Sao Paulo. The president of the country attended the opening of the project, and in his speech he emphasized, "We choose stability over chaos." Tesla at this point was already losing not only the market but also control of its own image. A brand that was associated with the future was beginning to be perceived as politically toxic and economically risky. Investors in countries with unstable politics began to avoid deals involving Tesla, fearing that in the event of new trade wars or sanctions, cars would be left without spare parts. On the contrary, BYD began to be perceived as a neutral, quiet, reliable partner. Its representatives did not make harsh comments in the press, did not interfere in political battles, and did not write aggressive posts on social networks. They just built, and winning.
After Trump imposed those sweeping 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel imports, the European Union retaliating with tariffs on up to $28 billion of U.S. goods. Trump making it clear this isn't over, vowing to respond in kind with sweeping retaliatory tariffs early next month.
They're doing what they should be doing, perhaps, for the European Union, but it does create ill will. And as you know, we're going to be doing reciprocal tariffs. So whatever they charge us, we're charging them.
Canada also striking back with new tariffs on $20 billion worth of U.S. goods, mostly steel and aluminum, but also computers and sporting goods.
Canada no longer wants to be an appendage of U.S. industry. Its focus is on building an independent energy infrastructure, and cooperation with the U.S. is no longer seen as guaranteed. All of this is reflected in the supply chain. In the traditional model, a car could cross the US-Canada border up to 7 times, going through machining, welding, painting, final assembly. Now, every border means tax, inspection, new deadlines. SP Global Mobility calculates that the cost of assembling a single electric car has risen by $4,000 to $6,000. US companies are trapped. Europe is cut off. Canada is turning around. Mexico is losing incentives. And the US domestic economy is not ready for this rate of self-sufficiency. Rare metal supplies are disrupted, logistics are disintegrating, and new plants are not ready. Ford has made a decision. He's not just abandoning the old scheme, he's completely rewriting the industry. With politicians entangled in tariff wars and allies no longer trusting Washington, only those who have time to adapt will survive. Everyone else will disappear. When Canada began freezing oil shipments to the United States, Washington didn't think much of it at first. It was a strategic mistake. At the time, about 4 million barrels of oil a day were flowing from Canada's Alberta to US refineries. It was the heavy oil needed for refining into diesel and jet fuel that went directly south to Texas, Louisiana, and the Gulf Coast. Without it, the supply chain was failing. When Alberta Premier Daniela Smith in April 2025 that Canada would begin diversifying its export destinations, it was taken as rhetoric.
Over the last couple of months. But the other thing that this could potentially be is an attempt at readjustment or correction by the Trump administration, in that one of Trump's closest kind of allies and supporters, and someone who's clearly very influential in the administration, is coming out to kind of push back against the recently implemented policies. So I'm thinking, or maybe hopeful is the right word, that this might be a signal that the administration is considering walking back some of those policies.
But within a month, the first Canadian tankers docked on the Dutch coast, and ports in Spain began unloading strategic supplies. Europe, after its rejection of Russian oil, gladly welcomed a new partner. The American economy felt it almost immediately. Gasoline in New England rose 41 cents in a week. Airplane kerosene supplies fell 12%. In Boston, Logan Airport announced plans to limit night flights due to fuel shortages. Local airlines began buying kerosene from Venezuelan suppliers at an inflated price with unpredictable delivery times.
Well, this feels more like a Tesla-only story when you look at just this fall in EV sales for them, that they're suffering across Europe, down 45% in January. The wider EV market in Europe up 37%, so rivals are catching up and performing.
It was at this point that it became clear this was no longer a temporary crisis. Canada was not just demonstrating independence, it was charting a new energy course. In March 2025, Ottawa signed a framework agreement with the EU to Cremeu to Common N Initiative, a program to supply oil, rare earth metals and electricity. In parallel, there were talks with Australia, South Korea and even Japan to create an international clean energy supply chain without US participation. But oil is only part of the story.
That's from the European Automobile Manufacturers Association. People just choosing with their wallets to not buy Teslas because of that Musk-Trump association. And actually here in London, an activist group called Everyone Hates Elon actually have been hacking bus stop signs with posters. I actually passed one yesterday. First, I wasn't quite sure what was happening, but it said the words 0 to 1939 in 3 seconds. The illusion here, 0 to 60 in like 3 seconds or something. But this poster was alluding to the start of World War II, and the image was of Musk giving that hand salute that we saw at Trump's inauguration that many have attacked as a Nazi gesture. Musk, though, has neither admitted or denied what he was doing. But we're seeing the knock-on effect of that anti-Musk anger across Europe and in terms of sales.
Tesla temporarily suspended export shipments for 2 months to reevaluate risks. Ford withdrew investment projects in 5 states. Rivian scrapped construction of a gigafactory in Georgia, despite billions already invested. And against this backdrop, China's BYD launched a full-scale expansion into Europe. The new premium brand Denza caused a furor at the Geneva Motor Show. Already in May 2025 in Munich started sales of a new electric range, a model with a mileage of 750 kilometers, charging in 9 minutes and built-in artificial intelligence, fully adjusting to the behavior of the driver. Prices are lower than similar Tesla models. Europe applauded. Meanwhile, Canada signed new energy agreements with Germany and France. Australia confirmed participation in the rare earth supply chain. South Korea expressed interest in a joint energy bloc. The US remained isolated. This moment was a turning point. The old model in which America dictated the rules was cracking at the seams. Now other countries were setting norms, choosing partners and building new economic axes. The key question is, will the US be able to adapt? Or has the time for monopoly passed? While the energy empire crumbles, the auto industry struggles to survive, and the dollar loses credibility, the political system is busy with arguments and shows of force. But markets are not waiting. They are making choices faster than politicians can open their mouths.